We're going to have Salvadorian dancers. We're going to have a cultural program tomorrow, along with our keynote speaker, Clyde. He's going to give us a little talk today. After I invite Gene Whitehorse to talk to us, and then Clyde will speak again tomorrow. And we're blessed with Madonna Thunderhawk here, who just rode into town. So hopefully she'll give us a talk tomorrow also. Okay, so for right now, we have a special guest, a good friend. He's Guatemalan, traditional man, and he's an interpreter, translator, Ismael Chel. I'd like to introduce him to give a talk for a few minutes, to talk to the world, solidarity with Guatemala. This is a promotion. We're promoting intertribalism here. We're not just one tribe, we're intertribal. Many tribes, one people. Okay, Ismael Chel, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Kim Akin walked in talking Comentare Nochmac Tony González. Tena. Estoy muy contento de que Tony González pues me haya invitado para compartir con ustedes este momento. I'm very happy because Tony González invites me to share with you this moment. So I actually grew up in Mexico, but I'm a Yucatec Maya, to be specific, and I grew up talking in Spanish and Maya, one of the branch of the Maya language. So right now, we have a club here in City College. We're gonna do a workshop language for the Maya language. It's gonna be on December 7th and December 14th. So thank you very much, and it's invaluable this kind of work we're doing now because I can see how our ancestors work on making a language. Building a language is not that easy. It's so easy to learn when you're going to school, but it's not easy when you're trying to communicate with other people in another language. So that's one of the points we have now, is to make you understand what I mean with my language, with each word in my language. That's why I'm trying to teach anybody the Yucatec Maya language. Gracias por la oportunidad y pues no les quiero confundir más hablándoles en maya porque no los van a entender, pero espero que algún día sí lo puedan comprender. I don't want to confuse more, talking more in Yucatec Maya language because I know you're not going to understand me, but I hope someday we're going to understand each other. Gracias.
Okay, on our agenda we have for this portion to talk about mineral resources and mining, extraction. This subject matter, U.S. corporations and industry, they're really attacking Mother Earth, and they're not sparing any opportunity to do so. And I'd like to invite Gene Whitehorse to come up and give us a short talk. And then we have a very important film. Manny Pino from Acoma in New Mexico couldn't make today's meeting. And I received a phone call from Eloise Brown, importantly, who had planned to come, couldn't make it either. And so we're going on without them. Important subject matter here. So I'd like to introduce Gene Whitehorse.
Thank you very much. Yat eto konjongo asahnit lo beneye kolon ba yatel tito.
Sorry.
La kodo na kodo ni hina so tao dan hino do no so kon kes kono so khashin zade shini so kai. Thank you again for this time and letting me talk about some of the issues that we are dealing with. back home. Jean Whitehorse, I'm from the Navajo Nation, also known as the Netka. And I'd like to talk about the uranium mining that are going to start up again in our land. And yesterday I talked about how only 10% of our land was returned to our people when they came back from the Navajo Long Walk. When the Navajos were forced to march over 400 miles to a place called Fort Sumner, and our people stayed there for 4 years. And when they left the land, the governor of New Mexico back at that time opened the land for people. It was called the land grant, and everybody, wanted a piece of that land. And when our people were finally allowed to return 4 years later, they only had 10% of what they had as their territory. And yesterday I mentioned that the piece of land that they gave back to us, they were saying it's just a desert. Nothing will grow there. Give it back to them, that's what they said to us. But now our land is, into Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. And I just drew I had a PowerPoint, but we don't have equipment, so. Okay, I think I'm fine. When we first returned, we only had this much right here. That's how much we had. And as the years went by, we regained the rest of the territory through executive order. Yesterday, somebody was talking about executive order. That is done by the president. It doesn't have to go through Congress. So the president signed piece by piece. Now it extends into Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. When you see the Navajo reservation, the map, internet, wherever, you don't see anything in Colorado because the people that took that land refused to give it back, because that was good land. There's a good, soil. They grow all the alfalfa hay down there. So during the winter, all the people that live in that area bring that hay to Gallup flea market, and then our own people buy that hay because we still have sheep, cows, horses. I still have sheep. So when I go there, I said, this is hay from my land, but I'll buy it because I need it for my livestock. Right now, the uranium mining, you see that area that's all checkerboard? That's where the uranium mining are going to reopen, because the Ninth Circuit Court overruled the 10th Circuit Court in Denver, saying that the uranium mining that's proposed to be reopened is an Indian country. Anytime the Navajo Nation passes a law, there was a law passed 2 years ago. It says no uranium mining on Navajo reservation, but we're not on the reservation. The two circles that you see there, that's where the uranium mining is going to be reopened in 2013. That's the proposal date. Even though we say we don't want that uranium mine to be reopened because of all the problems our people are still facing now, the illnesses, the contamination of our water, the circuit judge didn't listen to our side. In fact, this month, on the 15th day of this month, they denied the opponents that they weren't going to listen to their side of the story. So the HR, that's the uranium mining, nuclear mining, they got the okay to go ahead and start mining again. but it still has to go through two more organizations to really give them the okay to start mining. One of them is the Environmental Protection, EPA. And now it's in their hands to decide whether they should just, let the mining start again. But the EPA is the one that issues the permit for any kind of mineral extraction. So right now, our tribe are really working with the EPA to, give them all kind of reason. As it is now, like I said, not just Navajos, non-Indians that used to work at the mine are going through all these health problems. So it's something that we deal with every day. Not only that, Crown Point, Church Rock, those are the only two places that have good water source that haven't been contaminated. So on a weekly basis, a lot of our Navajo families do not have running water. I mentioned that yesterday. A lot of the families don't have electric. But all the electric that's coming from the coal mining is going to Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Tucson. All those power lines just go bypass our Hogans, our Navajo family. The water from Navajo Dam is piped to Phoenix, Tucson, but our people still haul water up to this day. And from Crown Point is the best water, and that's where they want to start that uranium mining again. So we're fighting, this every day. So this is one of the issues that we deal with. But you hear in the news what's going on at our Navajo Nation government. Our leaders are fighting each other. A lot of them weren't re-elected, so they're having meetings after meetings, approving things for 20 years from now without even thinking about the children, the next generation. A lot of these leaders are retaliating because they weren't, they didn't go back into office. Our council delegates were cut down from 88 to 24. So we're going to have less, leaders to deal with this time. So throughout, from now till January, when the inauguration takes place, we're going to be on the news. We're already on the news. At the same time, we're fighting these issues on coal mine, uranium mine, natural gas, oil. That's all the mineral that's on the Navajo land, like I said. We're not covered, we're not protected by the Navajo Nation law when they said no more uranium mining, because we're in Indian country. I live in Indian country. There's laws passed one after another from Navajo Nation, but we're not protected. In the meantime, nobody is really paying attention to our children, our youth. So we're dealing with another problem back home, teen suicide. That's where we should be focusing on, is talking to our youth, because like I said yesterday, the future lies in the hands of our children, our grandchildren. Where are we going to be 5 years from now if the uranium mine is reopened 10 years from now? Where are they going to be at? Little by little, the government is going to take the land back, because even though we say this is Navajo Reservation is tribal, is federal trust land, they have the title. We just live on it. And I tell my students, my youth, learn your language, keep your language. People say we're losing our language, but we're not. As long as grandmas, grandpas like me speak the language, it's still there. We're losing our children. We fight all kind of other issues with other tribes. Even that Save the Peak, somebody already talked about that. If we unite as Indian tribes, we can do this. People say think out of the box, but for us as Native, we need to think out of the circle. And, do what we can to protect our land, our sacred site. In Navajo, they call it Tupe'ina. Water is sacred. So that's what we're doing, is we're trying to preserve our water, keep it pure so our families can, keep using that water. And there's another issue about water rights, but that's a different story. So I just wanted to say, as much as Tony told me just to speak for 10 minutes, but that's what I wanted to mention is, in our area, we're in Indian country, so we really don't have a say-so. It's the people that own that Indian allotment. All they see is money. They want to be paid for that uranium. But we found out once they go into the ground, they don't stay there. They go 10 miles this way, 10 miles all over the place. So they're not actually drilling just where they got the permit. They just go wherever they want. Nobody's going to be down there to see which way they're drilling. So, but there's a movie here that will talk about the rest. Thank you.
Yeah.
Earthcycles.net live. We're live here in San Francisco. It looks like they're going to play a video, and so we'll see. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do this. Hey, can you turn it a little bit that way? No, the other way.
Oh, no, brother, we can't see now.
Yeah, we can't see now. Well, why don't you talk for a little bit?
Okay, but this volume's not on yet.
Yeah, it is. You have to have headphones.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. This is Telissa. Hello, my name is Telissa. Are you gonna watch all?
Some of you have probably seen this film, but I just got this special delivery this morning. And so it's it's revised. It's called Poison Wind.
Poison wind.
And then shortly after the film, for those of you that did not see this film in progress of the American Indian Movement, it's 10 minutes short. We'll show that after this.
1 second. One second.
Do we have another technician that can help Mary Ellen here?
In the 1870s, people were gathering around for food. In the 1819s, it was old and dark. That's why we bought a movie to watch called Poison Wind.
All right. Well, that was good. Yeah. We're here live
Well,
in San Francisco.
while we're dealing with that,
Thank you.
okay, I'll get it to him. There's
Thank you
a
very
beautiful feather that one of the dancers left behind. I think this is where that Cinderella movie came from. Somebody dropped a feather at a ball.
Cinderella movie came
Well,
from.
we're beset with problems. Louis.
Sorry about that.
Oh, it belongs to Louis? Does it say Louis or what?
Louis. Did
Louis,
Louis
by
or
the
what?
way, his mom has a bakery in the Mission on 24th. And we call it a panaderia. You know, so he's been our man donating bread and stuff like that, you know. It's great. But I was going to say we're beset with problems, but, you know, we got to be flexible. We're people on the move, right? And we got to be ready, think on our feet, etc. And, okay, do I have to cut it now? Can somebody hit the light?
Okay.
I just
so
wanna
we're gonna
say-
hit the lights
We gotta be out
Turn
here
it
by
off.
5:15.
to watch a little movie called Poison Wind. Thank you. This is Poison. The first part was people talking in the 1879s. People are in the way of TV to watch. Thank you. Now, what is that? Oh, it's a fire minister. Thank you. Ah, poison wind.
I want to sing some songs to the beings, to the star people, to the sky people, to the cloud people, to the snake people, to the serpents, to
Oh
everything
no,
that
they're
evolves
gonna
from
be
the natural
dead.
source. There's a need. That's why we are here, to support this.
Tens of thousands of tons of uranium ore were extracted from this mine.
It's
And
something, at
the
least they'll
majority
get a
of it
sense
went
of it.
to the Department of Defense of the United States government to make weapons of mass destruction. A direct insult to indigenous people in that, you know, this mountain was considered sacred to us.
That mountain is a part of us. Our lives are based on that mountain. Our warriors that went to the war in Iraq, that was a part of their prayers. So that mountain is an integral part of our way of life. It is I, it is me, it is who we are.
In fact, this mining operation spurned the initiative for inclusion of sacred site protection in the 1978 American Indian Religious Freedom Act.
That mountain has been there, and our prayers have been there before the establishment of any European settlement here in North America. That in itself is paramount. That in itself is justification to have a state, to Indian nation government to government relationship and discussions.
They said it was heard about worldwide because of it's one of the 7 wonders of the world. And then hearing about over 150 sites that are up for exploration on the Kaibab Plateau, how come that doesn't go around the world and shock people and say this is what they're doing over at one of the 7 wonders of the world?
I am also here representing our sister pueblo, Laduna, which housed the largest open pit uranium mine in the world at the Jack Pile Mine, 2,000 feet from the village, where many people have died of cancer as well, who never earned 1 cent from the uranium industry, but were victims of where they live.
This is a unique situation here, Crown Point, because of the 45-year history of destruction, of environmental degradation, of cultural violations, because most importantly of the historical legacy, the deadly legacy that uranium has on our people.
You know, in this area there are numerous mines and mills that are now abandoned, but at the height of development created high levels of contamination in the area of Ambrosia Lake, in the village of Milan. And you know, a lot of these corporations that are in 2007 conducting exploratory measures in the Grants Mineral Belt don't have any experience with uranium mining. They're just driven by the economic profits that currently exist. You know, it has again created that fever, that mining fever again for these corporations coming back.
When the last of the Comanche came in on the Southern Plains, the very last people to get in were treated much worse than the first people to get in. The warriors were confined in a ruthless stockade down in Oklahoma. And every afternoon, troops would drive up with a wagon with raw meat and lob it over the wall for these people to eat. We are doing the same thing today on the reservations.
And you know, you have supporters who oppose development, but you also have a segment of the population that are for uranium mining because of the depressed economic conditions of western New Mexico, Cibola County, where we're situated, McKinley County, which is to the west, where unemployment rates, you know, have consistently remained around 60 to 70%.
And we don't go on there unless somebody finds a uranium deposit or a gold deposit or something like that. And then we manipulate and we maneuver. We want to be leaders in this world. We have to stop what we're doing.
Revitalizing the uranium industry creates those, you know, situations of economic blackmail almost, you know, where it's very hard for these poor populations to say no to these types of incentives. Our concern as indigenous peoples is, are those same mistakes going to be repeated in the mining process? We have several watchdog organizations that both locally, regionally, and nationally that are looking at this whole new uranium boom. And you know, it doesn't help that this present administration is looking at nuclear power as an answer to climate change and global warming.
I don't think that's right. They shouldn't pollute the rest of our waters and everything else that we have around there. It's already messed everything up already one time. By doing some more, they've messed up our parents, ourselves, and now they're after our children and grandkids. So, you know, I don't think they should do that.
I think uranium workers had sacrificed their life, and they were misled into being patriotic. We understand the need to build nuclear weapons for our defense, but it should have been a fair game here. But overall, I think that we were really screwed on the whole mining industry.
It's like they're killing two people at one time. They're killing the enemies on the other side of the world, and then they're killing their own people, and it's like they're saying, oh, we're going to have to sacrifice you in order for us to win this war. Or we're going to have to sacrifice you so that our family could have lights.
In 1970, the Red Valley chapter had passed a resolution. An elderly by the name of Harry Smith Sr. came into the chapter, and he said that he had observed that people that had worked the mines were dying.
It feels like you're suffocating at times, especially at nighttime when I wake up like suffocating, like when I'm underwater and I need to breathe very badly, and I'm starving for air, and there's nobody to help me at that moment. And I still have the oxygen on, and I'm still suffering. And it's a very fearful thing to have fibrosis of the lungs.
As long as you don't find a cure for cancer, there will be no more uranium mining in my land. Because for everything else, for every needs that we have, we could maybe run out to the grocery store and buy these things. But for Christ's sake, you can't go out and buy a new pair of lungs.
My experience with uranium mining has been working a lot with the people who are dying of cancer. I've shaken many hands of my elders who are no longer here over these past few years I've been working on this issue. I've seen the devastation of these families.
Are we blind enough to believe that these corporations who did business in this area care about our well-being as indigenous peoples?
They just told us about safety meetings, about the safety glasses and not to smoke on the ground and to wear our helmets. And all we had is a paper mask. Even at the meal with yellow cake on the yellow cake we I was working there, all they gave us is a paper mask, and we needed better protection. They should have thought about that so that people won't be in this mess.
You know, are we blind enough to think that these corporations who are doing business in third world and developing nations, that we heard give testimony at the Indigenous World Uranium Summit in Window Rock? And I wish some of you people who advocate uranium mining and the uranium industry were there to listen to these horror stories. In countries like India, in countries like Namibia, Australia, where, again, people like us, indigenous peoples who live off the land, are being adversely impacted. And do you think these corporations give a damn about our lives?
They're greedy, they want the money, and then they leave. They leave us with the destruction and the contamination. That's their only game, is to get rich. And unfortunately, we have corporations here in the United States, and maybe even congressional people that have worked for these corporations. They're the ones making the money.
These corporations are there because they're making money. They don't care about our human health. They don't care about our infrastructure. They don't care about our economic development into the future. They only want the source of the ore, what's there, and what they can take with them. And whatever they take with them, they leave us with the mess.
For over 20 years, UNC and Kerr-McGee, just a few miles to the northwest, was going 24/7.
It seems to impact us the most, you know, and we're the ones suffering from that.
About 65% of Navajo Nation communities have dealt with uranium. I don't see no rich millionaire Navajo living amongst us.
When I was working as a miner, I was young. It was right out of high school. A lot of people were making very good money. That, I think, was the biggest draw. But I really feel that our safety was secondary to profits and production.
And I looked at my son, and I said, damn it, look what I got you into.
I tell him not to ever start, work somewhere else, go to school, become something else, not a miner. It's not worth you dying for $1.
8 hours, 16 hours, with my head crushed down, looking at this tube. And even the weekends, for their production.
The worst bosses that I had in my life were my own people. They couldn't wait to get on the ground to fire me because I was giving them hell all the time about the radon daughters, about how we were being poisoned. That's when I found out they were that crooked.
There were areas that were so hot that when you'd go in them, they had to be, 120 degrees or more. There was poor ventilation. We would work, and then when the inspectors would come in, they would close them off, and the minute the inspectors hit the surface, they would cut the wires, and we'd go right back to work in those same areas.
This is the laundry room where the man used to go take a shower. These are the badges for radiation, but they never went underground with the miner. They always stood in the surface. And we would take a bath with their radiation water, you know what I mean?
I hate to say this, but there were people that there was water that was running through the rocks and they would drink from that water.
But this water is full of cyanide, pulling it out of the radiation on the miners. But they said it was chemicals, but they never told us it was cyanide.
A typical day, you would go down into the mine, and they drop you down in this cage, and the cage had 2 levels of men that would go into it as they were dropped in. Now, one of the real common things is there was flooding on the different levels. So as this cage would get to a certain level, they'd drop off the men in the bottom cage, and sometimes there were floods, where the floods were coming out of the shaft, just like 4 foot of water going over a waterfall. Then they would drop the cage down to the next level so the other men could get out. The whole time, this water was, the guys that were still left in the bottom cage were just getting drenched. This was how you went to work in the morning. There were places where you'd have to go through 5, 6, 7 foot of water and crawl on the sides of the ribs of the mine shaft to get through the water.
No one was educated on the exposure to uranium, and in the process of mining and milling in the mining areas, everybody was contaminated.
You'd go through all that mud, and when you get off work, you'd hop in your car. A lot of the guys carpooled. The car would be all muddy, and then other people would get into the car afterward. You'd put your kids in the car in that muddy seat. You'd open your lunch bucket every day, and you'd have to dump out the dirt out of your lunch bucket. Sometimes the kids would say, "Hey, let me have that apple, Dad, that you didn't eat."
Miners took home water from the mine. Water was used for baby formulas to provide feed to the babies. Water was used for coffee, and water was used for drinking purposes.
And it's like, I never ever thought about bringing it home. Never.
Back in the late 1970s, 1978, 79, back around then, there were mining vents that came out from the underground mine that were pointed directly in the direction of the San Mateo Elementary School, where children played on that playground, with in close proximity to these radioactive contaminants, not only from the vent itself, but as you can see, mill tailings that were extracted from the underground mining process itself.
We have these people called Mojave downwinders that are still seeking compensation, the people that were exposed to that radiation back in the 50s and 62 and 63. And people are being compensated maybe like 4 or 5 states away, but then Mojave County is closer to Nevada than both of them.
This is my medications I take. I take nerve relaxers because they messed up my nervous system.
When I was coming home from the hospital to pick up Joan to go to our consultation, I snuck a peek at the CAT scans, and when I pulled out the 3rd CAT scan, it really showed the massiveness of these tumors. And I put it back in, and I pulled over the car, and I just sat and cried, because I thought there was no way that she could survive this.
I take antidepressants for the tumor they left in my brain.
Every doctor that's seen the CAT scan says, it's amazing. And they've never seen anything like it.
Okay, painkillers, because I'm suffering with pain 24 hours a day.
And I was told tumors like these don't occur in people under 65 years old. Yeah, I'm not 65.
It's very unusual for a woman of her age to have this numerous of tumors, this large. It had to be from 3 things, one of 3 things, either genetics, which can be ruled out, or exposure to uranium, or exposure to chemicals.
And this other medication is to sleep. Then plus the high blood pressure pill.
You know, there's just so many ways that this has really devastated us. Financially, it's devastated us. You know, we've gone through all our savings.
And it's always been a miserable life after I came out of the mines.
We've sold our cars, we've stepped down to smaller cars, less expensive, to try to get through the period of, you know, financial burden. And it's just devastated our lives in so many ways.
And for them to want to come back and put another uranium mine disgusts me.
They messed up my marriage. They messed up in everything. Another thing is, could not have no kids.
Especially the last year, which, you know, included all the brain surgeries, and it's affected our lives tremendously. It's affected our boys' lives tremendously.
For 4 years, you know, we didn't know what was wrong, and then the doctors could have taken a CAT scan and known right like that, but they didn't. You know, why?
But I'm doing pretty good now, but with this medication. But there's other miners out there are not getting no treatments or medication to fight this horrible disease.
I have friends that had several of their boys that were my age that worked in the mine, and their mother washed their clothes, and this lady has in the last couple of years died of cancer. They couldn't figure out where she could have been exposed or why she would come up with cancer. And now that you think about these, of bringing it home, it's very clear what probably happened.
We have cancer clusters of not only the mining population, but the non-mining population as well. We have innocent children, as the sister expressed here, who have cancerous-related illnesses and other mental birth and physical defects, who our elders tell us were never in existence before uranium mining.
Another thing, I have an uranium rock right here today to show what the reality of this is. This little thing could be gold. If you worked in a gold mine, and if you swallow this, they'll keep you there until you use the bathroom. And they didn't care for radiation, they didn't care where it went, because it was out there to kill people anyway. This stuff is not to breathe, not to touch, because it's dangerous.
You're gonna pull it out, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
All right, Avi, I really, are you okay with that? You're good with
Well, we touched it underground
Yeah, I know.
and everything. They didn't tell us the dangers.
I feel so, I just don't want, you know, I'm so touched by everything you say, and I don't want you to hurt yourself.
Well, we ain't gonna get hurt because
I mean, I know
the
it's
the
already-
damage
I
is
know.
already there.
I don't want you to think that I'm just standing here going, it's okay for you, because I really
Yeah, but-
feel none of this is
but
okay
this-
for anybody.
But in 1950s, Carnegie was using those tailing ponds to pour cement on these houses in Grants. And then they sold them to the public. And they don't come and check out these houses and see how much radons these houses have. And all that junk, lumber, timber, rock bolts, everything, they were taking it out of that mine and bringing it over here. But the thing is, they didn't want to tell us how dangerous it was, because they didn't want us to get panicking, because that's what they wanted. They took care of themselves, but they did not take care of the individuals. Here's the evidence. My dad brought it to me when I was a kid, saying it was a dinosaur bone. But this rock, I think, is pure uranium.
When they had the uranium spill at United Nuclear in 1979, I was working that day. And when I got off work, I drove right by the broken tailings dam with the water coming out. And I swear, if I would have had a camera, it would have been on the cover of Newsweek. It would have been bigger than 3 Mile Island. But because of the fact that it was so remote, there was no publicity, you know, it got washed under the rug. In the early morning, hours of July 16, 1979, 14 weeks after the accident at 3 Mile Island, the dam at Church Rock burst, sending 1,100 tons of radioactive mill waste and 90 million gallons of contaminated liquid pouring towards Arizona. The wall of water backed up sewers and lifted manhole covers in Gallup 20 miles downstream. No one was killed in the actual flood, but along the way it left residues of radioactive uranium, thorium, radium, plutonium. It said, except for the bomb tests, Church Rock was probably the biggest single release of radioactive poisons on American soil. The flood went through Gallup. The residents were left to clean it up. Poisonous material was left in the ditch for years. The winds have blown this residue. I mean, it goes right through the middle of the town, a block away from homes.
Still, yeah, it'll keep on for at least 100 years or more. And then when there's wind, all that stuff picks up again and blows all over. People are breathing the same stuff all over again. It'll never go away.
When I started looking into what the EPA does, it just shocked me. The EPA asks United Nuclear for their recommendation of what needs to be done to clean it up. They decide how to clean it up, which pretty much was a handful of workers went out with 50-gallon drums and they filled up the drums with sand and they took a few truckloads out and deemed it cleaned up. Now this is the way the EPA works. Not only does the offender police themselves, they do their own recommendations to the EPA and then they report on the results, because those cleanups are just a minute fraction of what was released, and I can guarantee that that stuff is still somewhere along the line, either in the ditch or blown out of the ditch, and anywhere that people are exposed to that stuff, all you need is one molecule to lodge itself into your body, and it can cause many different types of cancers.
Residents have documented tritium-tainted water in some of the drinking wells, which makes it non-potable for human consumption.
The EPA needs to take a stronger arm and a stronger action.
I believe it's our federal government's responsibility to help clean up our lands. By this, they need to make corporations accountable for the damage that they've done to our lands, the damage that they've done to our people.
In the Holy Road, a sequel to Dances with Wolves, Kicking Bird and Ten Bears go to Washington, D.C. And while Kicking Bird goes around and has his picture taken and so on and so forth, Ten Bears asks curious questions about how white people are living. And one of the things he asks is, what do you do with all your refuse? So they take him out to where they're burning huge towers of refuse, and Ten Bears says to the white people he's with, you know, this is too much smoke, this is too much whatever. And the white people say, well, don't worry, we have a plan in place that in the future we're going to bury this refuse. And Ten Bears is shocked beyond belief, because he says, in the earth?
Well, one thing I know that the people they won't move. They're not going to move. They can't. There's nowhere else to go.
We're not people that get up and move to different lands, you know. This is where we were born, and this is where we're going to die.
The government can set them land over here, over there, but they're going to say, that's not mine. This is where I belong, right here.
They need to be connected to the land. They belong to the land, and the land belongs to them.
Once people get set in one area, that's where they're going to stay because of the sacredness of the area. We're here to be protected by the mother, and that's what we're here for.
It is a difficult thing to choose this way of life. No one pats you on the back. No one says thank you, but that's just the way it is. And it's not because of the hate that we have. It's because of the love we have for our land and our people. It's the love for our ancestors. But more importantly, it's the love for our future generations.
Recently, the Pueblos of Laguna and Acoma have passed resolutions opposing any form of uranium development in this area.
It was called the Indian Protection Act. we ask you, the state, to honor that law that came from the Navajo Nation government.
The Eastern Agency of the Navajo Nation has also passed a resolution, and I understand Navajo Nation, the entire council is looking at a resolution opposing any form of uranium development in the area.
We can provide these documents to you as official governmental documents of two sovereign pueblos in the state of New Mexico.
What I want to share with you is that a law was made by a people, by a government. It's a true act of sovereignty that this law was based on the fundamental law of our Navajo people, fundamental principles based on our Navajo way of life.
Makes it unanimous, all 19 pueblos, the Navajo Nation, oppose any form of uranium development on this mountain.
What befalls one Navajo befalls us all, because we are one family. It saddens me that my relatives here that want uranium mining, and I have relatives here that oppose it, yet we're one family.
It is good to be here with my relatives, the Shoshone people, in support of their survival, in support of their livelihood, their traditional ways.
I've been thinking about heaven.
Our elders tell us what to say.
What am I going to do? What can I do for the future generation? What can I do for my grandmother Earth?
No place to call my home.
They say, you are educated. You know things that we don't understand.
No place to run.
I come here to pray for them, sing for them, heal the earth and heal the land.
But you look in my eyes.
You know what this world is about. So we're going to tell you some things. We're going to teach you some things.
So cold you'll break it. You bend.
How do we make the promises of democracy real for Indian country and for ethnic minorities?
So you can go out into that world and speak on behalf of us.
Just like the breeze and the wind.
And for the uranium miners, where are we? Well, I think we're going on 2 decades now.
To speak on behalf of this land and the animals and birds and all the sacred points.
Trying to make these promises of compensation real for the uranium miners and the members who made these immense contributions during the Cold War.
So always remember that the voice that you carry, the voice that you speak with, does not belong to you.
If the United States government can spend trillions of dollars overseas for whatever, surely they can give some money to its own people.
Fire concedes us no desire. But you
The voice and the words that you speak belong to the people, belongs to this land.
I wanna be there again.
And so at some point, your community
we're told that the state is going to allow a permit in the Mount Taylor area that uses those conventional methods. We're not going to let that happen.
Many of us consider ourselves warriors because we are fighting for our survival.
We are from warrior society, so we can be warriors when we're called upon. And we'll fight that industry tooth and nail to the very end. All right.
All right, and you're listening to www.recycles.net live in San Francisco with the American Indian.
All right, give it up for Jenny Pond, the film producer, director, and Manny Pino, Amester since he was born. He couldn't make it, but he had this especially sent to us, so he's got a good message there. And I'd like to ask Gene Whitehorse to come up for just a few minutes. Anybody has any pertinent questions? And while she's coming up, we're going to see the AIM film again, 10 minutes. And uranium and nuclear development, that's enemy number one here in this country.
It looks like
And this is one of the reasons why we have to challenge it. And you know and I know that American Indian movement has been on the radar of this country, the government, the police, in every order. And that's why we don't have a lot of support. You know, I had a hard time finding money for this event, you know, and a lot of people don't want this organization. They feel it's unpopular. They haven't forgotten that the police in the 70s and 80s had the names of every member of American Indian movement, every member that supported American Indian movement. So there's still a little suspicion, paranoia in our communities. We got to relieve it, but you know what? It feels good because we know what we're doing here. Okay, and then we heard in here about 10 Bears, Chief 10 Bears, in the movie that there's going to be a, what do you call it, a follow-up movie? Sequel. There's going to be a sequel, and they said 10 Bears goes to Washington, D.C., huh? Well, you know, he's not only the late Floyd Red Crow Westerman, but he's not coming back. That's an old joke from Charlie Hill, that he's not late, he's not coming back. So, you know, I'm anxious to see who the sequel 10 Bears is going to be, who goes to Washington, D.C. Anyway, here's Jean. She's going to open for a few minutes here, and then we're going to show the movie AIM, and then Clyde for a bit, and then we're going to listen to Samson Wolf and Leonard Peltier and Peter Clark.
Thank you again. The movie that you just saw is, like I had mentioned, it's a true story, and that's what we're dealing with back home. And a lot of these hearings that are held at the circuit court, the judges rule mostly with the uranium company, oil company, coal. Because they know they're elected official, if they should rule for the minority, they know they're not going to be back in office over there. So they're looking out for themselves. They're looking out for the people that put them in those offices. And a lot of our people are still suffering. Sometimes people say that there's two things that went to World War II from the Navajo Nation. Uranium that was used to make the bombs, and the Navajo code talkers. Our language was used. I'm a daughter of a Navajo code talker. My father was a Navajo code talker. So I know a lot that goes on back home. And like I said, during the summer, I have the opportunity to speak to the youth at our community centers, our chapter houses. And I talked to them about the issues that they're going to face when they become the future leaders. How are they going to handle it? What choices are they going to make? Because this leadership is going to go into their hand. And it's better that we, educate them now while they're young. A lot of time where it's, a lot of on the Navajo Nation, they say this is Navajo owned, Navajo this, but it's not. It's run by non-native. We see our people on the casino floor, stuff like that. So I don't know if anybody has a question. Right now, even though the Supreme Court gave the ruling to the uranium company, it still has to go through 2 other organizations. And you can find that on the website. It says to support, you write letters. Last night I was looking at the website. There's a listing of Native people that are fighting for their sacred sites, sacred peak, and all that. And I'll give you that website. I took it down to make sure if somebody had a question. Thank you. Yes.
Just briefly, you mentioned about the water rights and how the council has sold out on the water rights, and then Navajo Nation President did a veto, he signed on. Can you mention that quickly?
Yvonne, are we talking about that at 3? Or, yeah, I mean, are we talking about that later or no? Okay. To answer your question, just recently the Navajo Nation had to review a lease agreement again because the lease ended just this month. And they were pressured to make a decision. Our Navajo people didn't want the council to agree to anything. And, but they were given a time limit, and they made an agreement to only receive a portion of the water right. That's the Little Colorado River and the Colorado River itself. The Navajo people said to not agree until they give the whole, out of the 100,000 footage of water that runs through the Navajo Nation, the Navajo people wanted 6,000, but the tribe agreed to only receive 3,300. And in this agreement, it includes that in the future, the tribe cannot file a claim against non-native if they want to build a well in the border town, that they can use as much water as they can without the tribe, having any kind of a claim to it. And one of the council that was against it was saying that 20 years ago, we were talking about a barrel of water. This one that was passed is just a bucket of water. 20 years from now, it's going to become a cup of water when our children are, in office. Thank you.
All right. And I might add that on the Colorado River, there are 35 dams. 35 dams on the Colorado River from out there starting in Colorado all the way down into Mexico. And the tribe, the Indian nation that would receive the water at the end of the road down there in Mexico, they now get a cup of water, or they have to walk. You can't imagine 20 kilometers for their water now. So, and there's 35, 38 dams all the way down to Mexico, so that gives you a little picture on that. Okay, we're going to roll with the film again, and then we're going to have Clyde and the Women's Circle, or the Women in Leadership, before 3, I hope.
It took one generation following termination and relocation for the sum of a population of very patient people who are accustomed to existing for 10,000 years at a time.
This better.
Finally lose patience with dishonest government.
If you want to oppress people or colonize people,
one of the first things you do is you confine them to an area like a reservation.
Every Indian alive today is there because their ancestors survived the calamitous killing of people from 15 million down to 200,000. That is an enormous assassination of people.
People just don't seem to understand this or anything. You know, that we are as equal as any other person.
The 60s represented a very important decade in the history of social movements in America.
Anti-war demonstrators protest U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War in mass marches, rallies, and demonstrations. The estimated 125,000 Manhattan marches.
Almost everyone you talk to was involved in some type of movement for social change.
We were watching this happen, but we were saying, well, this stuff is happening to us as well. There would be ads in the paper, Indians need not apply.
And so this is the background in which American Indian movement was formed. We felt totally inspired and excited about the idea of Indian people getting together in a national movement for self-determination, for treaty rights, and against racism and discrimination.
I think that there is a bit of serendipity in history, and that partly the people who have the answers come along at just the right time, and partly the times come along at just the moment that these people are ready to do their work.
120 million Indian people, estimated 120 million Indian people have been wiped from the face of the earth since Columbus and the conquistadors landed here in this part of the world. That's why the American Indian Movement was born in July of 1968 right here in North Minneapolis.
But these are the people who changed all the rules, all the way up to the White House.
Because we felt that absolutely nothing was being done to upgrade the conditions that Indian people were forced to live under here in America. Land of the free, home of the brave. They put me in solitary confinement. And that's when I met Eddie Vinton Benet. I was laying there, and I think I was in there for about 4 days in total darkness. They have a little peephole about that big. That's all you can see, a little light come in. We're looking at one another's eye. And then he started telling me the story about, this study that him and his caseworker conducted. And they found out that every single Indian in that institution was in there for alcohol-related crimes. Every single one of them was a repeat offender. They were doing the less crimes, but they were doing the most time.
And when we were arrested, the men were beaten severely. The young women were sometimes raped by the police.
And really the initial growth, as I understand it, was right here in the Twin Cities area, where they started up street monitoring, court watching, powwows, ceremonies, various events.
We demonstrated. We carried signs. We went to meetings. We confronted various institutions that control our lives, both on the reservation and the urban areas.
We'll go knock on the door. If they don't listen, they don't hear it, we'll knock a little louder. If they don't hear us yet, we'll knock the door down and go in, and we'll have a position papers with us, what we want them to do.
That was one thing that was unique, is the action that took place that actually involved people.
It's not going out looking for a fight that I've seen. It's standing up, knowing that a fight is likely to come because the people who have been involved in shady practices, oppression, are likely to continue in that course.
When I was in college and AIM came around, it was like I was free for the first time, because I understood exactly what I wanted to do, that I wanted to be part of this movement that was about tearing down the system that had so enslaved Indian people, that had stolen land, that had made us beggars in our own land. I wanted to change that, and AIM provided the vehicle for that.
We decided to hold a powwow, so that was the first powwow in Minneapolis.
It was still outlawed by the government. Still outlawed. We brought a drum down, found a couple singers.
We were trying to get people back into their culture. We were thinking that was the way that we were going to correct a lot of this, was to get them proud of themselves, and the way to be proud of your culture is to learn it and to do it.
It had a lot to do with a revival of spirituality in the Indian world, not just Minneapolis, but universally.
That was the thing that people had always said about AIM, you know, AIM drops in, and AIM isn't here. And I can remember Vernon and Clyde standing up and saying, we've got to listen to these tribal leaders and follow their advice, because they have to live here when we're gone.
I want you to know how much I love you, how much I care about you, how much this movement cares about you and each and every one of you today. And we'll never, ever allow this government and the churches that work hand in hand to strip us of our traditional way of life ever again. I make that commitment to you. You yourself make that commitment to one another, that that will never happen again.
You know, I've heard some people say that, oh yeah, the movement is dying. You know, someday it's not going to be here, but I don't believe that. There's too many that support it. A strong movement, spiritual movement, and I don't believe we're going anywhere.
Oh. Coming to a theater near you. I'd like to introduce the founder of American Indian Movement, national spokesman for indigenous struggles, Clyde Balcourt.
How Bijugan, Nigan away with on Disneykas, or Sishak Dodain, Anishinaabe, or Gichida, Three Fire Society, gathering of the Sacred Pipes, Sundance. My spirit name is Nigan Nawewidan. Where I come from, the Great Lakes area, all the way up into Canada, northeast, south, and west, the land of the Anishinaabe people. I didn't get my name at birth as I should have. I didn't receive it until following Wounded Knee in 1973. When, as most of you heard that are in this room back then, I was shot and killed early in the morning on the Rosebud Reservation. And we know today and believe today, those that are been there at that time, that it was an effort by the United States government and the FBI to try to silence this great movement. And when I came home and survived that, I found out that they wanted to give me an eagle feather. They wanted to recognize me as a chief. And hereditary, my grandfather, great-grandfather, was White Crane. He was one of the principal chiefs in our nation. But I was told later on that you couldn't even touch an eagle feather unless you had an Indian name. Unless the Creator gave you a name. And so this young man was sent out into the woods. The same one that came and visited me in Stillwater State Prison when I was judged habitual and spend the rest of my life in a prison like that. He was the one that became my spiritual leader, Bagwebidan, leading voice of the great Anishinaabe nation. And on the third night, way out in the woods, no car, no telephone, nothing. Just some tea to drink and a little lean-to. On the third night, he went to sleep, not thinking that the Creator was going to come and speak to him. He said about 2:30 in the morning, could see the sheet lightning. He was dreaming to see the sheet lightning lighting up the sky in the west. And on his dream, when that storm got closer, the trees started to blow back and forth. And all of a sudden, there was a bolt of lightning, thunder. Woke him up and started to drizzle. Packed up his gear and came back. And the next morning, the trees are way out in the woods, a little place called Round Lake, St. Croix, Anishinaabe. Cars parked all over the woods. My wife kept insisting that I go to the ceremony, and I kept telling her I couldn't go. I was all stitched up. She just kept bugging me. And to make her happy, I went, not knowing that they were going to have this ceremony. And I was going to be presented with this feather. So I was whisked into a sweat lodge and told that dream and about that vision that this young man, my brother, had. And from that day forth, I would be known as Nigan Nawewidan, or the thunder before the storm. And I like that a lot better than Clyde. And he said, I was told to tell that story at times like this. So we wake people up yet so they can make sure that their children, not somebody that's 36, 37 years old, would have a name given to them by the Creator, but a little baby, when they're still in the womb of the mother, that tobacco would be given for that child. That's what will keep the movement, he said. No matter what happens, no matter what the government does, what the public school does, what the churches do, to steal this beautiful way of life that we have, we will survive through those names and to our children because our grandchildren today are that 7 generations that our grandfathers and grandmothers talked about. It's that 7th generation that Philip Deere talked about in 1972. One day he was out, he said, digging a ditch and picking up rocks, because if he didn't get those rocks out of that culvert, his land would flood every year, every spring. He said, all of a sudden, he said, I heard a drum. I thought I heard a drum. He said, I went out on the road and I looked way down the road and I couldn't see nothing. So I went back and I started digging the ditch again. It's in Skokie Creek. His people came from out in Georgia, came to resettle, carried that fire all the way across America, kept that fire going. And he said that when little of nothing was left, little of nothing was left, when all of our way of life was nearly extinguished, no more names, no more ceremony, reservations, tuberculosis, all the diseases of alcohol that came before us. He said Indian people would stand up again. We didn't know that. We didn't know about that vision. We didn't know about that dream that Philip Deere and others all over the country have since told us. Every tribe, every nation where I go in the sweat lodge and ceremonies, I hear people talking about that generation that would stand up. So Philip Deere could hear that drum again. Put his shovel down, went out and stood on a gravel road. Way off in the distance, he could see dust flying. Could see something red coming at him, a red blob. Like. And as they got closer, here's these Indian people. They had little berets like this, red berets on, and an AIM jacket. He said that was the fulfillment of the prophecy, and he threw his shovel in the ditch. He said, I joined the American Indian movement that day. My relatives, we live in 3 stages of life today. It's the awakening. When we start waking up to who we are, that we're Native. We want to make our life well. We want to change our life. We want to do something for our children. We want to learn as much as we can. We want to go to gatherings like this. Learn as much as we can. Then we go through an awareness period where we start learning. Everywhere we go, we learn something. We learn about the uranium. I knew that story over 30, almost 40 years ago. I was down there in Navajo in Four Corners. I saw those little children sliding down those tailings, that uranium dump. Little children, stuff all over their face. I saw all that. They said all those things would happen, and we would stand up again. And now we're living in that era of the fulfillment. That's what I call it, the fulfillment. We're fulfilling the prophecies right here today. My relatives, my brothers and sisters, and nephews, nieces, we're fulfilling those prophecies of every one of our tribe and our nations across this world. And people are coming from all directions. I used to talk to people from down Mexico. They used to come to Crow Dog, Sundance. They used to tell me about how their people were practicing brain surgery down there when the Spaniards were still living in caves over in Europe. They told me about a city down there called Teotihuacan that had running water coming through the city, viaduct onto all the homes. Farmers would come in once, maybe twice a week, and they'd collect the feces from the water, and they'd go out and irrigate, fertilize their gardens. They had running water when the Spaniards were still living in caves over in Europe. I got to see that with my own naked eyes. I got to see that with my own naked eyes. I know that the fulfillment is here. When I speak at immigration rallies, as I did years ago and do all the time in Minneapolis and across the country, I welcome my brothers and sisters from the South as brothers and sisters. I tell them that the only immigrants I know are the ones that came across that water in a boat. If the Spaniards were moved in up here in the Columbus landed down there, you'd be speaking English, we'd be speaking Spanish. There's no difference. And that's the way we got to think today. That's why the American Indian movement worked for 30 solid years through the International Indian Treaty Council to get a resolution passed called the Declaration of Rights of the Indigenous Peoples of the World that was signed by the United Nations. Only Canada and the United States and New Zealand and Australia refused to sign that. Australia and New Zealand have since signed it, but Canada and the United States still hasn't signed it. And we all know the reason why. We all know the reason why, because they have treaties. They have treaties with us. And all the gold and all the uranium and all the oil and all the rich farmland and timberland has been stripped from our land. And not a penny ever went back to the Indian people. And when they recognized that international treaty, that International Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, which is something we should be on the Obama administration every day of the week from this day forth. We got people working through Canada, the First Nations, over 600 First Nations up there to force the Canadian government to sign that declaration. That binds us together and puts us in a position where we can deal with these uranium, these poisons, theft of Indian burial grounds, the denial of religious freedom for Native people. And I know a lot about that. When the American Indian movement was born in July of 1968, that's what we said we were going to do. We're going to build our sweat lodge whether they liked it or not. And by the way, the first sweat lodge was built in Stillwater State Prison in Minnesota. Now they're all the way across the country in federal and state institutions. I remember right before I got out of prison, in 1962, I started becoming aware of who I was. I started to read Black Elk Speaks. Anything I could get my hands on, the history of the Ojibwe Nation. I wanted to learn. I started learning so much. I started dreaming about being an eagle, flying over the land. I've never been to Pine Ridge, never been to South Dakota in my life, but I started dreaming about Black Elk. How he too was an eagle, and he'd fly down and he would see not only Indian people dancing teepees all over, smoke coming up from campfires, sacred fires. He even saw painted horses on their back hoofs dancing with the sun dancers. That's how beautiful it was at one time. That's all I dreamt about. Oh, I'm going to get out of jail and I'm going to go to a Sundance. I had to be there. 2 years after I got out of jail, I was invited to go to a Sundance on Pine Ridge. The only remaining Sundance known in America on Pine Ridge Agency, Pine Ridge, South Dakota. I was going there to be a sponsor of a man that wrote that book. His name is Ed McGraw, Rainbow Warriors. A Vietnam warrior. He used to brag about the 56 missions he flew over Vietnam, bombing and killing people, innocent people. He asked me to be his sponsor. And I got there. They gave me directions. I drove into town. I want to know where this Sundance is. About 2 or 3 miles out of Pine Ridge, I drove down into the woods. I couldn't believe what I saw. There's an arbor with merry-go-rounds and Ferris wheels all the way around it. Food stands. Out in the field, there was a big rodeo going on. I must be at the wrong place. And I started inquiring, where's the Sundance? They said, this is where it's at. I met a young man there. His name was Layman Brightman. That's where I met Layman. I met him there. He was walking around. He was angry like me. He said, I can't believe it. He said, look what's going on. They got merry-go-round, Ferris wheel, food stands. We're walking around the arbor, and I run into my brothers, Dennis Banks and Russell Means. They were dancing there. One had a snow cone, and the other one had a fry bread burger. And I said, what's with you guys? Why are you doing it? They would take the Sundance drum out at noon and they'd bring the powwow drum and all the drunks would come there. I was never so angry in my life. I told Eamon Brightman, they said, you think this is bad, wait till tomorrow. I said, what's going to happen tomorrow? Sunday, they said. The Catholic priest is going to come here and serve communion, and the Sundance will be over. I said, not on my shift. Oh, you're not Lakota. Lakota, you better not do anything. You'll get everybody turned against the American Indian movement. And I told Russell Means and Dennis Banks, if we don't put a stop to this right here and take back what is ours, we might as well go dig a hole and jump in there, all of us, and cover ourselves up. Oh, you better go see Footscrow, the Grand Chief of the Oglala Nation. I went to talk to him through an interpreter. Told me there was nothing he could do. They gave him tobacco. He conducted, it's up to the warriors. I said, who are the warriors? He said, the Sundancers. I started laughing. I said, they're not warriors. They had horse harnesses on. They had a rope tied to the horse on, dragging one buffalo skull, falling down. That's how weak we became. Not just Anishinaabe, not just Dakota, all tribes in this world, in this Western Hemisphere, got to that point where the churches took over and controlled everything. He said, go talk to the Sundancers, the warriors. And I went and argued with them. And finally they voted for me to stop that priest from coming in there. And the word spread. Moxon Telegraph. The biggest crowd they ever had there in history on Sunday. And sure enough, at noon, here comes this Catholic priest, all beaded, white vestments on. Two little boys following behind. One had, I guess, the blood of Jesus, and the other one had his body in chalices, carrying him in behind him. I said, come on, Lehman, let's go. Crowd starts screaming and hollering at us, telling us, get out of here. Anishinaabe, go back to Minnesota, leave us alone. Throwing eggs and hamburgers and anything they could get their hands on. And I told Lehman, come on, don't pay no attention. I walked up to that Catholic priest and I said, Father, his name was Father Stantless from Holy Rosary Church, I found out later. I said, Father, the Sundancers no longer want you here. They can't have this Sundance without me. They can't use peyote. That's why they call it the Native American Church. They have to have a Bible in that teepee or their home before they can use peyote. I said, Father, those days are over. Please, I'm asking you to leave. Who are you? Me and Lehman introduced ourselves. Lehman was from the United Native Americans right out here in Berkeley. I told him I was with the American Indian Movement. He scoffed at us. I heard about you rabble-rousers. I said, Father, please, please. By this time I could hear sirens in the background. Please, Father, leave. What are you going to do if I don't leave? And I took one arm and I put it around my shoulder, and Lehman Brightman took the other arm, and we tiptoed him out of there. The following year, we danced at Crow Dogs, and 38 of us pierced for the first time in 90 years. Today, there are over 90 Sundances on Pine Ridge alone, another 60 or 70 on Rosebud, all the way to the Northwest Territory, all the way down to the southern tip of South America. The Mexica and the Sundancers, the people are coming back together again. That's the fulfillment. And every one of you are part of that. Everybody wants to have, what happened to the American Indian movement? They think if we're not standing with an AK in our hands, overlooking Wounded Knee, the movement's not here. The movement's in every single one of you in this room today. The movement's at every Sundance, it's every school, emergence language tables. In Minneapolis, there's 6 and 7 of them going on a night. We had the first alternative school. We have 7 of them now in the Twin City area. Every tribe across the country, tribal chairman, old American Indian movement, they won't be around more than 6 months. Now they all got a casino in their backyard. Didn't even know how to spell the word sovereignty when we were using it. I was up in a little place up in Pequot Nation, called themselves Foxwoods, the largest casino in the world. Not one person there looks like he's native. They're black. They're black. They're slaves that ran away, and the only place they had to run for refuge was to live among the Indian people, and the Indian people adopted them. And two old grandmas got together one day and traced that blood. Took them 6 or 7 years to get federal recognition. Today they have the largest casino in the world. I was at a banquet. And they asked me to say the opening prayer. About 200 youth came in. I said, how much time are you going to give me? They said 3 to 4 minutes. I kind of chuckled to myself, you know. And I got up and I said, these young people have to know what we're all about. So I explained to them the 4 directions of the universe, to our Mother Earth, to the Creator, how we recognize all living things on earth as a relative of ours. Everyone, everything, tree life, plant life, medicines, vegetable, fruit, animal life, fish, fly above us. And when I got to this tall black man sitting at the head table, White House officials, their senators, congressmen, the mayors, all over 3,000 people, about 80% of them black. I asked for a show of hands that day. I said, everywhere I talk to black people, they talk about their Cherokee blood or Cheyenne or what. And sure enough, about 3/4 of them raised their hand, said they had Indian blood flowed their veins. And when I sat down, this tall black man got up and he reached over and he shook hands with me. I've been wanting to meet you, Mr. Belcourt. I found out he was the MC. He was the architect. He was the guy that drew up the whole plan for the biggest casino in the world. And guess what he said that day? He said, I never thought that I'd be sitting here at the head table with Clyde Belcourt, one of the leaders of the American Indian movement. I don't know how many leaders in this country have stood up and said this, but I'm going to say it today. I'm going to say it today, and I want you to hear me loud and clear. If it wasn't for the American Indian movement, I would not be standing here today, and this casino wouldn't be standing here today, because the American Indian movement taught us what sovereignty was all about. That's what he said. And the people stood up in a standing ovation in solidarity. So the movement is a movement. It's not an organization. It's not the NAACP or anything like that. It's a movement. It's a movement, a spiritual movement that moves every day of the week. It moves in all these young men. Every single one of those young men that spoke today, those young ladies, every single one of them are members of the American Indian movement. Every one of them. My sister here told us last year about a secret that she had to hide from her parents when she was down here in relocation. She didn't want to tell them that she was a member of the American Indian movement. That's how scared people are today, of the unknown. And that's who we are. I want to thank you for listening to a few words here. This is just a little trailer here. This 10 minutes. We have 96 hours already taped and filmed. We still got probably 3 more times the amount of time to go out and film and to talk to people in Pine Ridge and all over this country that have been affected by this movement. And that's going to be the American Indian movement story. It's not going to be about the Ojibwe warrior or where white man fears to tread or anything like that. It's going to be about you, about the people that were in the struggle, the people that benefit, the people that were awakened, the people that were made aware, the people that are living that prophecy that I talk about. It's going to be about you. And this film won, they just tested it, won first place. Right now it's out to 28 or 38 other film festivals right now. Just this little 10-minute trailer. Just a little bit of that much about this movement, who we are, and who you are. who every one of you are here in this audience here today. And I want to thank you for coming here, for your continuous support of the American Indian movement, for our children and the unborn generations to come. Miigwech, thank you very much.
Now can turn it volume up? Yes! Woohoo! Yay! Okay.
All right. Clyde Belcourt, thank you very much. We want to now invite Morning Star to come up and with the women leadership, AIM leadership, and Yvonne Swan. And we're going to be setting up a table here, and hopefully Madonna will join. And we made an exception here. We're filming, if you don't all mind, for AIM and future use. And we're allowing an additional camera for the taping of the women's meeting here that's going to be conducted. And we hope they'll give us a copy and we'll share it with all the AIM chapters, perhaps. And then after the women leadership, Leonard Peltier, strategy for Leonard Peltier, and we're going to have Peter Clark and Samson Wolf. And by the way, Samson Wolf has a nice song, Guitar Warrior. He's going to be singing a song with his presentation. And I just got word that we can be relieved in the sense that we can stay here till 5 o'clock. All right, and then we need everybody to help clean up and get this place squared away for 5:30 for some other class that's conducted here, and to impress upon you that the class members that are coming at 5:30, they paid for their classes, so you know they want to be extra sure that they get their space and time and for the price. So 5 o'clock, we're out of here. Yeah, go that way. That way.
Might be a little awkward, but that's just the way it was.
Okay. All right. The clock is ticking. 3 o'clock, and it's a women leadership. All right. So the guys, you be sure to stay also, because this is for you. And just on a personal note, for you all to know that 5 years ago, I received a liver. Okay, I was gifted with a liver. I had a liver transplant, and I was near my deathbed. And thanks to you and a lot of people here, strong prayers, I know, because I know who you are, who came to a special ceremony that was for me at Alcatraz Island, and someday I'll show that to you. But it was from, I have a liver of a young girl, and she was 19 years old, and she died in a car accident out there in Reno 5 years ago in October. And the doctors even then told me that because my family was ready to give me half a liver, because they can give you half a liver and it'll grow into a natural liver. And the doctor said, let's hold out. You need a whole liver. You need a whole liver. And I held out, and they got it to me, and I'm forever grateful. So, you know, I'm down for it. I'm down for this special session right here. So,
Moi, Isnaksil. Hello, my relatives. Iskwis Ipatch. My name is Tzipatch. My American name is Yvonne Swan.
also known as Yvonne Wanro at one time, and you can Google that name and find out a little bit about me, or else you can ask any federal agent. I'm from Washington State. I came down Friday, and I'll be here all week, and I'm very glad to be here. I thank each and every one of you for this day, for putting this on, for all the volunteer work. I've been watching all the time. I've been helping, trying to help as much as I can. Until I can't help anymore, it's like paying back, because the American Indian movement has helped me in the beginning. When I first needed help, I was so alone, and I'm not alone anymore. But this panel today is going to be from the Woman Heart and Spirit. We're going to address issues each in our own way. I'm very glad to introduce Corinne Fairbanks from Santa Barbara, AIM, and Ann Begay from Los Angeles, Navajo Nation, Madonna Thunderhawk, of one of the vintage warrior women from South Dakota, Lakota, and Morning Star Gali and her daughter. She's raising her daughter in the movement. She's going to be our technician in the future. And starting today, I was watching her. So what I wanted to point out is, as being a woman and going through what I went through in my 60-some years, I have experienced personally some abuse. And we were discussing this in a few moments that we had together. We're survivors of abuse as women, as is Mother Earth, and as is Grandmother Moon. So we identify with all the creation, the female part of creation. This movement is very, very important. My role as a woman in this world is very important. And my role in this movement is important. I take it very, very seriously. I feel responsible for my actions. I try very, very hard to do what's right, because I know that I'm being an example for this young girl and for these young men. If I do something wrong, I have to answer my ancestors. And I want to go to them with a clean heart. I don't want them to ask me, when you saw this girl suffering over here, these people were picking on her and beating her up and calling her names, why didn't you go help? I want to be able, I don't want to have to be confronted like that. I want to have a clean heart and say that I picked her up, I helped her, I gave her a home, I gave her some food. I brought her to the doctor. I brought her to a counselor. I brought her to a ceremony. So I wanted to, before I passed the mic, I wanted to explain what my thoughts. I give a lot of talks, and I wanted to explain the history as I know it, which is very limited in my short life on Earth. In the beginning, the Creator gave us a design of life and gave us our teachers through the animals, showed us how to live on Earth and help each other, take care of each other. We're caretakers. We're up against the destroyers. This mentality, we're up against all that. So we're told to not take more than we need, because there's future generations coming who are going to be hungry. We've tried to stick to that responsibility as caretakers, in spite of all the hardship. In the Bible, I read the Bible now and then. I was raised in boarding school, and I was forced to do all that stuff in boarding school and learn all that stuff about God. But I noticed in the Bible there's not too much about women, and what there is that put women in a bad light. Mostly men in the Bible. Pick it up, read it, first page. Man will have dominion over all these things. I get mad and I start talking. I'm a woman of this earth. And I care about Mother Earth. And nobody's going to have dominion over me or my children or my Mother Earth. And I told many, many men in the clergy this, what I feel, when I was fighting to save Mount Tolman, one of our sacred mothers, from mining. I said on page 1, that's what it says. No wonder women are having a hard time. No wonder Mount Tolman is suffering and Mother Earth. And this one clergyman came up to me later and he said, well, that isn't what we meant in the Bible. We meant like what you Indians mean, that they're caretakers, you know. But that isn't what it says. So you should go back and change it. And I know that's not going to happen. So then, in high school, I almost failed history because history was, well, I don't know. I couldn't stand it. Well, I found out I wasn't going to graduate unless I passed history, so I hit the books and I got by with a D minus. And it's a good thing because today, my people are telling me the history. Everybody teaching me your history. All of you teaching your history, the important parts of history. And I read books written by Indian people and by our allies about the history. When George Washington wanted to set up the Bill of Rights and the Constitution in this country, he sent some spies over to the Six Nations to find out and study their model of democracy because it was working. You go there and see how those Indians are doing it on the East Coast. So Ben Franklin and his little cohort went over there and found out what the model of democracy was in the Six Nations and brought it back to Washington and his cohorts. So they started writing the Bill of Rights. What? Women? They have women that own the land here. Nah, throw that out. What? Women can pick the leaders? We can't have that. Women can get rid of a leader? Well, we can't have that. And what's this? Spirituality? Toss that out. Got rid of all that stuff and wrote the Bill of Rights. Then they tortured the women, the white women who wanted the right to vote. They tortured them. I studied that. I saw pictures, pitiful pictures of these women who were brutalized and imprisoned because they merely wanted the right to vote. And then along comes well, I won't go into that case. But there's a lot of cases of Indian women in the courts being battered. I interviewed Mary Pearson. She's a Creek. She's now a judge. And she said, I studied the name calling. She said, I wondered, where did we get all these name callings, savages and all that? And she said, I studied it. I researched it. She said, in 1491, I found it. It was in the Papal Bull. Papal Bull? I never heard of that, but it sounds right. Yeah, in Rome, where the Pope declared that Indian people didn't have souls. And so throughout the world, then, we became known as savages. And you go on and you name all the negative names that we are called. So that's where the name calling came from. So I told this young boy today, this morning, I said, you know the worst name I can call anybody? And he looked at me and I said, you name caller? And he laughed. But see, we got to be careful, our conduct. And I'm talking to myself always. You watch your conduct. You watch out what you say because you represent your people. I represent my people. I'm very careful. I don't want to call people names. When my little grandson was calling a name or lying to me, I said, hey, the British stole my land, and they said that it's theirs. They stole and they lied, and I don't want you to tell any lies. And I don't want you to be stealing, or I'll call you British Columbia. And so it worked. So it's a lesson for me too. Be on your toes. Watch your conduct. Treat your sisters with respect and love and stand by them. My brothers did that to me. I had brothers. They had my back all the time. My dad did. My dad wouldn't let anybody say any foul language in front of me. So let's be that way. I'd like to let my sister, starting with my sister Madonna, who came here from South Dakota, give her viewpoint on anything that she feels like talking about.
Okay, here we go. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for being here, and I'm glad that I'm here. Actually, every year I try to make it, in the past few years anyway, to come to this event. But for a lot of reasons, Alcatraz, you name it. But this year I didn't think I was going to make it, but I don't know how it worked out, but here I am. So I kind of caught a ride over here from Oakland, so I'm here. But yeah, this is really good. I enjoy coming and listening to people talk because we're elders now. We're the elders of the movement, and that's good. But also to see young faces, younger people. But with what I learned from the movement over the years was that the struggle is intergenerational. The struggle goes on all levels, whatever the struggle is, land, water, our people, the children. So, the work continues, the struggle continues. So, yeah, I'm busy back in South Dakota, and since the 60s, that's what I've been doing, because that's what I learned from the movement, not to just sit back and complain and whine around. You get in there and you struggle. Our ancestors did, that's why we're here. So I come to these to learn and to listen to other people's point of view, because back in South Dakota, sometimes for progressive, for lack of a better term, progressive thinkers and stuff, there's few and far between. We're under that tribal government mentality, that welfare mentality, handout mentality. It's all there. So to come out here and to hear my sisters talk, it's good medicine for me. And every time I really like to hear Clyde talk, because he fires me up, and I feel good when I'm ready to go back home and, kick some more ass or whatever, I mean, that's, it's just good when you're in the trenches all the time, year after year, you need to come and meet with people like this, and it really does me good. Thank you. Hand stuck.
Ja, det Hassan Shea and begin Yanshia, and I couldn't and so touching Bashashin. DJ by Jensen, Dokwan, Nice Trangi, Neha Jensen. I just introduced myself as Ambigay and my clan from the Navajo Nation. We're living in Los Angeles area now. My daughter's a filmmaker. She's also the daughter of Leonard Peltier. And we've been living out there for almost 10 years now. Oh my God, it's so difficult living out there because you have all kinds of different people there. I used to put them in categories, like, the Powwow Indians, the Hollywood Indians, this Indian, that Indian, all different kinds. And I used to get so tired because they would tell me, what do you know about AIM? What do you know about Peltier? You're just a Johnny-come-lately. I said, yeah, to LA. And, but a lot of them don't know where I started from and what my family's about. People used to tell me, you're just a bitch. You're just so mean. And I think that's because when I was growing up, I came from a medicine family. My grandfather was a medicine man. My grandmother was a hand trimmer. My mom is a crystal gazer. She does her healings through that. I don't like to call him by a white man's name, but my grandmother's brother, who I consider my grandfather, was a singer in the Navajo way. And my other grandfather, my grandmother's brother, Charlie, he was a roadman for the Peyote Way. And coming from all that, we really had a structure. And when I left the reservation back in the mid-60s, I thought everybody was like that. And I would get mad at these young kids who would say, yeah, I'm Indian, and then they go off and do drinking and all that. And I said, wait a minute, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. And I would talk to them, and they wouldn't listen. I would talk to them again, they wouldn't listen. And then finally, I'd smack them over the head and say, wait a minute, you sit down here and you listen. So after that, I got that beautiful title of being the queen bitch. But nowadays, the young generations that I talk to, they listen, they sit down and they listen and they ask questions. What happened back then? What happened here? What happened there? Who was here? Who was there? And it's really nice to hear those questions. Where were you at this point? What did you do? How did you meet? I said, no, that's off the charts. You're not going to find that out. But I started in the movement in the very, very beginning in the early 70s. I worked with Clyde's brother, Vernon Belcourt, in the Denver AIM office. And from there, we did a whole bunch of things. That's where I met Madonna and Yvonne and some of these other people who are oldies, but goodies. Hey. But we've known each other for a long time. We hardly ever see each other except in groups like this, at meetings like this, at conferences. And it's really good to be able to know I think we re-energize each other by being together, by talking together, and just telling stories about what we're doing, at what level, who we're talking to, what funding we are doing, how the programs are working in our areas, just different kinds of things, and it's so good to hear that. One of my really big pet peeves is about the honoring of women. There's none, not in the LA area. I'm a veteran of two things, the American Indian Movement and the United States Army. I'm honored in the American Indian Movement by being who I am. But in the United States Army, in Denver, I was the post commander. In LA, I was just like, that one time one guy came up to me, he says, hey Ann, you're always bitching. He said, why don't you go out there and carry the flag in? You know what I told him? No. And I told him no because of the way he asked. I was not going to do that. My bitching, you bitch your life, because I want to see all those other women veterans honored. One of my best friends, Regina Brave, is a United States Navy veteran. I honor her, and I honor all the other women who were service veterans, but I honor more the women who stood for us in Wounded Knee, at Kashina, at Fairchilds in New Mexico, and all the other places that we have been confronted with, because we were there alongside the men. And so you honor the two, both men and women, because we all stand together. We don't stand apart. Look at us, we're all sitting together. We need to do this. We need to honor each other. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Corinne Fairbanks, and I first got introduced to AIM in 1986 out in Big Mountain, Arizona, but I didn't really get involved with AIM until the early 90s with Fern Mathias, who was the executive director of the Southern California chapter of AIM. And I learned a lot. We both did. I met my husband at the same time, and we learned a lot about what to do and what not to do in starting a chapter. And there was a couple of things that she had mentioned to us, and sometimes Fern would say things as a joke. One of the things she'd say is, beware of anyone with big egos. And I remember someone had introduced themselves as a warrior, and the first thing she said was, yeah, right, they're probably not a warrior. Beware of anybody who claims to be a warrior, because they're probably not. Your community or your chapter will know who's a warrior, but for someone to claim to be a warrior, they're probably not. The other thing she would warn us about is New Agers, and even people that claim to be traditional would often be New Agers underneath. And I see that a lot, especially for those of us that are on Facebook. You'll see all of these people that claim to be traditionalists, but then they're doing some really weird stuff, and it's all under the guise of being New Agers. And it could be as simple as, you know, since we live in an urban situation too, there's a lot of people that know they're Native, they know what tribe they are, but because of the disconnect, they're not near where their people are, they're gonna go to an organization or meet a group of people and look for that guidance. But women need to stay with women. Women need that medicine from other women. Men stay with men, and they need that medicine from other men. A woman should not go to a man to look for that kind of medicine and guidance, just as a man should not go to a woman and look for that guidance. There's reasons for that separation, and Fern was very, very clear about that. And that's, again, one of those New Agers, having those people that claim to be traditional, and then they mix those co-ed sweats, or they mix those ceremonies, and then they do a little weird thing, you know, with, well, hey, I could show you what you need to know. I mean, it's all under the guise of having an ulterior motive, and that happens in our communities. Unfortunately, that happens in our AIM chapters. When you've been working very closely with a group of people for a long period of time, you have to see yourself as a family. You can't see yourself as a place to snag. You cannot snag a brother and sister in your AIM chapter, because the way Fern explained it to us, the way we lived in our AIM chapter, is that, you know, our AIM chapter was organized for if you're in an AIM action and a bullet comes towards you, you have to know that everyone is going to have your back. Not that someone's going to sidestep and go, oh, okay, you can get the person behind me. And that was something that we learned working with Fern, and when Yvonne and I were talking the other night about how we wanted to organize this panel, one of the things that we talked about was having agitators and disruptors and people that don't even know that they're probably working with the feds, and how they agitate and disrupt chapters. I've seen it happen in Fern's chapter. We had a problem happen in our own chapter. I've seen it happen in other chapters where people do the work that the feds want them to do by disrupting their chapter. And it starts off with talking negative here, talking negative there, talking negative here. And it could be male or female. And nothing brings down a chapter faster than watching that happen. And so I was really, first of all, I'm very honored to be here at this conference, but especially honored to be in this table with these beautiful women that I idolize and have deep amount of respect for and learn from every time I speak to them. But that was just one of the things that I wanted to throw out there that I've worked with, that I've seen, and kind of be concerned about with the women in this room and the men in this room, that this panel is really for men and women to learn from.
Chimisamui, greetings again, my relatives. Like I mentioned this morning, my name is Morningstar Gali. I'm a member of the Achamawi Band of the Pit River Nation. I was born in the AIM House in Oakland, California in 1979 that Bill Wapapa was running at the time, and I was, I believe, the first of a number of home births at the time, because Oakland had the second highest infant mortality rate in the nation. And so my mother, along with a number of my aunties, decided that it would be much safer for us to be born at home. And so it's an honor to be here on this panel with all of these women, and I feel like a baby on here, but so I'll just keep my comments short and sweet. But I just wanted to say, you know, that organizing within this community, organizing within this movement, has always been an honor, and I've always felt very grateful to be able, to be able to raise my children in here, and just have that opportunity to be connected to. Although we were raised in an urban area, my homeland is about 4.5, 5 hours away from here, and so I had the opportunity that many other people did not have, in being able to go back home and being able to practice our ceremonies and be on the road in the summer, and just visiting and be able to, just the opportunity to get out of Oakland and be connected back to our relatives and our cultural ways back home. And in that comes along with it, a lot of people ask, you know, in being an AIM baby, I guess a second generation AIM baby, is that I hear a lot of interesting comments, and one is that, you know, people's perception of AIM and people's perception of what the movement is. And what I always say is that for me, the movement was always grounded in a place of spirituality and love. That was the movement that I was raised in. And so I try to carry that along with my children today, and in organizing within my own community. There's obviously barriers that we've come across, and sometimes it's concerning because there is a lot of abuse out there. And like Corrine mentioned, there's a lot of people that mention, that, are out there front and center that want to say that they're warriors, but when it comes down to it, they're not out there conducting themselves in those traditional ways. They're out there thinking that they can abuse people and thinking that, bullying their way around is the way of being a warrior, and it's not. And so even in my own community here, I faced harassment stemming from sexual harassment, from physical threats. When I've had my daughter, who was maybe 4 at the time, right, sitting on my lap. And so we need to be able to step up and support one another in that. And in my experience, it was brushed off as something that was, people thought, oh, you must have some sort of personal relationship, with this person that's harassing you. You must have, when you're little and they say, oh, that person must just like you, just ignore it. And it just continued and continued. And it's not that, it's more than that, and I never did have a personal relationship at all, but it was knowing that, this individual had a history of abuse of women within our community, and not tolerating it, and not taking orders because I was a woman, and not taking orders in that, and just the whole issue around feeling threatened as women, as a young woman speaking up. I guess that's all that I want to say about that. But as Yvonne mentioned, that we're survivors. We're survivors of rape. We're survivors of abuse, and that myself personally. And so I just wanted to put that out there, because in the way that we're approached sometimes, in the way that we're approached by men, just keep that in mind next time, in the way that you approach us, in the way that you approach the women. And so, with all respect to everyone here, to our brothers that set this table up for us, to everyone that stepped outside and took a smoke break, hopefully they can come back in. But I'm going to pass this back on to my elders here.
I have one more thing to say, and I know Corrine's probably going to hate me for it. But I look around 20, 30, 40 years ago, we had our kids with us in the rooms where we were at meeting. Madonna had her kids. I had my kid. A lot of the women who were in the movement at that time had their kids. So today, I'm asking each and every one of you, where are the children? Where are our future leaders? They're supposed to be learning from us here, and they're not here. Where are our children?
Not long ago, I was invited to speak on the subject of government surveillance in the 70s, and I was recommended by a woman from the Spokane Reservation because she knew that I lived in Spokane and that I was involved with the American Indian Movement and Leonard Peltier Defense Committee and all that, and so I accepted. And as best I could, I informed them, I told them I can remember being under surveillance in the 70s, and they wondered why, and I said, because of Leonard Peltier is my friend, and I was doing support work for him, and because I knew Bill Kunstler, he was my lawyer at one time. I mean, he was anywhere Bill went, the press just followed him, and they gave him a bad rap as they did Leonard, and the American Indian Movement So I said, yeah, my support committee in Washington, D.C., their van was broken into, and all the literature on my case, at that time I was a defendant in the state of Washington versus Yvonne Wanro, all the papers were stolen. And I told my son, the American Civil Liberties Union, the National Lawyers Guild, and the Support Native American Solidarity Committee, they sent out information. They said the FBI is in town and be careful what you say. If you don't say anything, they can't turn it and use it against you, and beware of people with shiny shoes. And so I told my son, he was 11, I said, you be careful. You know, my house was called the AIM House because we were at the invitation of an elderly lady of the Spokane tribe. We were setting up a temporary spiritual camp on the Spokane Reservation on her property, and Steve Robidoux and Rocky Duenas agreed to help this lady set it up so that we can invite elders from the 4 directions to come and give us some teachings of the old ways, because she said if we don't do this, they'll get lost, the old ways. And so once you guys learn, then you go to your communities and you share what you learned. And so Steve and Rocky did that, and they asked me to help, and so I opened my home in Spokane so that people coming into town could take a shower, use my phone, whatever, camp overnight, bring supplies, go up to the camp 30 miles away. So my house was, they called it the AIM House, which, you know, so this constituted surveillance. My son said, my friends out there said there's police going through the alleyway, you know. Oh yeah? Well, don't answer any questions. If they try to ask you questions, you tell them to come and ask me. And you look at their shoes. Remember what I told you? Okay. So another time he said, Mom, me and he called him by name, we were standing there talking, and this unmarked car comes up, and he said, there's 2 guys in there in suits, and we were wondering what they wanted. And so my friends took off they took off, and he said, so I decided to go home, and that guy got out of that car, and he said, and he had shiny shoes. He said, so I took off running home, and he said, and I jumped over this fence, and that guy grabbed me by the arm as I got over the fence, and he wouldn't let go, and I kept telling him, you let me go, let me go. And he kept saying, I just want to ask you some questions, Darren. How'd you know my name? I just want to ask you some questions. How come you didn't tell me this before? You know, and I asked him, and I don't know. And I know why. But I said, well, how did you get away from him? I spit in his face. And I was very angry about that, but of course I didn't do anything. I just was glad that he said, you're going to have to ask my mom about that. And okay, Darren, okay. So, you know, and then even when I was fighting mining on my reservation, I had my son and my nephews all trained security. I said, each one of you are security. Anybody asks for me, you remember what they look like, remember what kind of car they're driving, remember what kind of shoes they're wearing, whatever. And you call me first, or let somebody know. So, okay. They call me, Mom, there's a guy down here, he's got tattoos from head to down his arms and everything, and he said he met you in Montana and he wants to see you. Is he okay? Richard? Yeah, that's who. Okay, send him up. So, you know, that's the way I train my kids. And another day they said there's a big old stretchmobile going by my house, and I lived in the woods, in the trees on my reservation. It went past the house, turned around, came back, stopped, and rolled down the window, and then they rolled it up, and then it left. And I thought about John Trudell and his family, how they perished after he burned that flag. And because we were up against Amex, a big rich corporation that wanted to mine on our reservation, that, you know, we better be careful. So we really were praying hard. Every day we had ceremony, Sweat Lodge. So if anybody has anything to say about surveillance, I would like you to say it now. If anybody has anything to say about Leonard Peltier, the panelists here, any advice to the elders, ways that we can show support to help strengthen the women in the movement, give us some advice, give us some help. We represent, there may not be very many of us here, but each of us represent hundreds of people. I came down here as a representative of my family, and I'll go home and I'll have to make a report. And they trust me, they trust my judgment.
I just wanted to add a little bit of what Yvonne was saying, and again, it's just something that I had noticed, is that I lived with Fern for about a year, and she warned us before we moved in that there'd be cars parked out in front of her house, and sure enough, there was, nice cars with people in suits across the street. We'd let her know, and she'd go, oh, okay. And she just kind of like, oh, they're there again. And it was a shock to us. That was in, like I said, the early 90s when that happened. And anyway, so we opened up our chapter a couple years ago, and we had been talking to other people, and they'd been saying the same thing, like, okay, remember that your phones can be tapped, remember that don't meet at your house, pick a public place, da-da-da-da. So we thought about doing that, and one of the things that came out was a story not too long ago. They were a peace activists out in Fresno area, and this was just a couple of weeks ago. There was only 7 people in their chapter, but they had found out that they had been infiltrated by a Fed because he had died in a car accident under a different name. And here was a little chapter of peace activists that had been infiltrated because of their work against the war. So if they're being infiltrated, and you're involved in an AIM chapter that was the third, domestic terrorist group in the nation, then you're going to be infiltrated too. And the feds won't have to do anything if you allow someone in your chapter that's going to be negative and make a lot of disruption with everybody else in your chapter. So everyone has to be vigilant not to allow that negativity to tear down their chapter. Everyone has to be respected and as a family in that chapter in order for it to survive, and know each other very, very well. Because if they could be infiltrated, your chapter will be infiltrated too.
There's one more story that I want to share with you, and I don't share the story with a lot of people, and I haven't shared the story with anyone until about a year ago, when I was asked about what it felt like to be on the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee back in 87, 88, 89. What it was like to have a daughter, Kathy Peltier. And you all know Anna Mae Pecto-Aquash. Okay. When my daughter was about 5 or 6 years old, we were living in Omaha, Nebraska. And she was going to school. I would be so terrified of letting her go anywhere. So finally said, okay, just let her go, let her go. So I would send her around the corner to the gas station to get a Sunday paper. And I'd be like this at the window. When she'd come back, I'd kind of scoot in, but still watch. One day, she went to school, and I timed my routes just so that I could be home seconds before she came around the corner from school. That day, I was home. I didn't know where she was. I looked out the door. I looked out the door. I looked out on the street. I looked over to the corner. I walked to the corner. I walked around the corner. 30 minutes had passed. 45 minutes had passed. I didn't know where she was. I called her friends. They didn't know where she was. I was walking up the street towards the school when I saw this police car, and I just lost it. I said, my daughter's missing. I don't know where she's at. So they helped me find her. We finally found her. My stupid cousin had her. They went to some Indian store and came home, and before they came home, they got her some ice cream so she wouldn't be crying, I want to go home. What scared me about that incident was that years earlier, when she was 2, right after we came home from the longest walk, what happened was I took her to the park. This gentleman sat down next to me with shiny shoes. And I wasn't thinking at the time, and I just watched my daughter play and everything, and he says, that's your daughter? I said, yeah. And he says, who's her father? And I looked at him, I said, none of your business. And he just kept asking a barrage of questions, and I wouldn't even answer him. Finally, he said, well, we know who you are. And if you're smart, you'll know what we did to Anna Mae can happen to your daughter too. So for all those years,
It's been terrifying.
Okay.
To know that they can do that to my daughter, it pisses me off every time I think of it. It really does. So watch your kids. Don't matter who you are, watch your kids. Always know where they're at. Even now, she's well into her 30s, and I still know where she's at. It still scares me when she goes out by her, with her friends. It still scares me. And people always say, "Why don't you cut that apron string?" It's not that. You don't know what I had to go through to raise her. People don't know. So that's all I wanted to share with you, and I hope you guys really take care of your kids. Really watch after them.
You want this? Yeah, I'm going to do this, but you could go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to enlarge on that a little bit. I have a daughter also, and she was 12 years old when I took her traveling, and she was a month old when I took her to the first International Indian Treaty Conference, when the Treaty Conference was founded in South Dakota. And so in 1989, when the elders asked that I coordinate a blockade up in southeast British Columbia on my original homeland to protect an ancient burial ground from desecration by Canadian Highway Ministries. They wanted to build a road and a bridge. 6 of us went up there to start it, and other people said they'll bring supplies, so that's what happened. My daughter was only 15 years old, Chante Washdewi, and I said, "How come you came with us and did all that, Chante? I saw you out there holding those," she was standing there alone holding those, this heavy equipment. I don't even know. My little grandson knows more about that than I do, but it had a blade anyway. She said, "I don't know, you just told me to do that." "Whatever you told me to do, Mom, I did it without asking any questions." So it was just automatic. But this one man, he tried to come in and infiltrate our camp. We had that mile-long road blocked off, and then the burial ground, ancient burial ground, was in the trees on 20 acres. So this man said, "If you guys better be careful." She was up there with the elderly woman, and we were watching the South Point, and this man tried to move in, and they blocked him, and he said, "You better be careful, you'll be down there eating rocks." And my daughter didn't know what he meant until years later. We told them, if you're in danger, you whistle, but I didn't know they didn't know how to whistle. We didn't have any whistles. We didn't have any walkie-talkies, All we had was one press person. I learned that from the American Indian movement. You protect your people, you have somebody covering it from the press. We had to use what we had in the moment. In the one day's notice, we had to go up there to a country that we had never been to before, just maybe one evening. You never know when you're going to be called to action. You never know when you're going to be asked by the elders to stand up and say a prayer. You never know when you're going to be asked to transport a fugitive. You got to keep sharp, and be on your toes and be in spirit with the Spirit. You got to educate. You got to teach somebody. I taught my daughter. She's teaching her daughter. Her mom taught her. She taught her son. Her son's famous. She taught her daughter. She's got her son here. You don't have to be alone. You can adopt. I can be your sister. I can be your grandma. I can be your auntie. There's no reason why any of us have to be alone in this world. We're here, remember. We're caretakers, are we not? Yes. So the government is merely a screen for the rich corporations. Big enemy. They can do whatever they want because they have the money. They have the money to buy people off. They have the money to send somebody in to disrupt, and they have done that. But we don't ever underestimate the power of the people. We can develop, some people are born with the natural gift of discernment. I'm not, but I'm developing it. I'm getting so I can tell, I can read people more. And I hang with those who can read people immediately. So if there's any questions, I'll leave it open.
Oh, okay. My name's Abel Silva. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for this. I got here not by coincidence. I came here for a class, and I'm not in my class now because I wanted to be here. But I come originally from Puerto Rico, one of the very last living colonies. So I know of abuse. I know of search for identity. I have written letters to many of the political prisoners that are held in federal prisons because they tried to liberate Puerto Rico as a free nation. As you may know, one of our leaders was also assassinated by the FBI when he was unarmed in front of his wife. And yes. My question is, how could you support those women in Puerto Rico who have identified with the Indian nation, who are trying to help us realize our identity back in Puerto Rico, because we need to realize who we are. We have so many barriers, since we were told in history books, for instance, that our indigenous people did not exist anymore, that there was no indigenous people in Puerto Rico. And thanks to Ricardo Alegría, he did some research, and he found out from the skulls, he had to look at their teeth, and we realized that many of us have those same teeth as the skulls, and many of our families grow the same fruits in their backyards and use some of the same remedies, medical remedies, as the Indians did. And we're just starting to scratch the surface. How could you help us?
You want to know how to help the women in Puerto Rico? I understand that I did not get the first part of your...
We have great women leaders.
Oh.
They need support in helping us realize who we are.
Yeah.
And in our search for freedom.
And you want to connect with other women of other indigenous women? Is that you want to? I'm just.
Oh, okay. There is a need for support for the movement in Puerto Rico. Our resources are being depleted faster than they are here, because even though the laws that are supposed to protect the environment apply there.
You contact the International Indian Treaty Council, the information office here in San Francisco. It's down on Mission Street. The phone number and the address. We can get Morningstar Gali on the end here. She's a representative, works in the office. But one of the board members is from Puerto Rico. A woman?
Naniki Reyes, and she's a board member, and she currently lives out there and does a lot of work around sacred site protection issues. So, and I guess in the original, when the Treaty Council was founded, there's a clause in there that specifically talks about Puerto Rico and support and connecting of indigenous peoples in Puerto Rico is mentioned.
We need greater support because right now, the rainforest that was one of the main sites, a very important part of it was completely depleted. It was in the hands of the government, and they turned it over to some developers who were very responsible.
It's very important that you get in touch with the people at the International Indian Treaty Council. And the International Indian Treaty Council was formed in 1974, and it's the diplomatic arm of the American Indian movement. So you're in the right place. You just get, they have more expertise in reaching worldwide the process by which to protect your resources.
I have a question. I'm next, Adrian. I have a question for you ladies. I'm aware that the Grand Council has bylaws pertaining to the treatment of women in the group, and I'm aware that excuse me, and I'm also aware that most chapters have bylaws pertaining to the treatment of women and children amongst those groups. This question is for Corinne, because you're fairly new in the chapter. If bylaws are broken, how do you guys as women deal with those individuals pertaining to respect of women or disrespect of elders or children?
Well, as I said before, our chapter is new, although my husband and I have been involved with AIM for about 15, 16, 17 years, but our chapter is new, and everyone in our chapter knows each other very well, and we've all worked together on different types of projects prior to starting our AIM chapter. And one of the things that we said in our bylaw was this. We said, number one, we're not recruiting members. We just felt that we needed to put out the word that the kind of membership we would entertain would be people that pay child support. If someone is a perpetrator or an abuser and is not getting help for that, we didn't want them in our chapter. We didn't want them in our chapter if they were not spending time with their family, because we put family first, because what is family? That's your people, right? So consequently, almost everyone in our chapter, unless they're kids of chapter members, are all single parents. And we're okay with that. There was, in August, a little ways ago, we wrote down, we were having an open meeting, and we put down that criteria for if you were interested in becoming a member, or at least coming to the meeting, we put down that criteria. And I was very pleasantly surprised at the response back. I mean, some people thought I was talking specifically to them about, well, I don't pay child support because of this and this and this. And our deal was, well, you can't have kids and not put them first. You can't have kids and expect the government to raise them and be a member of our AIM chapter. That's not going to work. And so the people that we've got in our AIM chapter, I believe, are high quality people, the people that would stand up and fight and take care of one another. And I know that a lot of other chapters are doing that. Now, if there's someone in our chapter that is disrespectful to, let's say, a woman in our chapter, then they're usually talked to by we have a spiritual leader in our chapter, and we have elders in our chapter. And of course, that hasn't been the case since we all work together. We've all known each other, and we have male single parents and we have female single parents. So we all need each other, and we help raise each other's kids. I don't know if maybe anybody else would like to answer that question.
I don't know how much time we have and everything, but I would just kind of wanted to comment on this because, of course, being at my age now, my memory's kind of, it's not what it used to be, but back in the old days, back in the day, it just seemed like one of the things we did a lot of things, and our people, we didn't have to recruit members or anything like that. I mean, our people just came. And of course, it was a different time. There was different issues are going on. But all I can say when I look back at the beginning was, it was like harmony. There had to be harmony. Otherwise, how did we get everything done? There wasn't the women over here and the men over there and this, that, and the other thing. It was a movement of people. And like my sister said, it's when you're talking about people, you're talking about family. So I think that's why we had, to this day, we have respect for each other, men or women, because we all went through a lot back in the 60s and 70s. We went through armed conflict together, you know? So we have a bond. And that, for anyone in the later years to disrespect that by disrespecting others, especially women and children, elders, whatever, to me, that's, I just don't understand that. They have no business in trying to involve themselves in the American Indian movement. I mean, this is just something I wanted people to know, you know, about why we did what we did, and we were able to do it in the past, in those days, because we all stood together. There wasn't, of course there was incidences, because like Clyde said, we were a movement. I mean, anybody could jump on our bandwagon, you know, and we weren't into, you know, carting everybody and checking them on. We were a movement, and we've had hundreds of people on any event we were at. Any time we were gonna go do something, confront the police or confront whoever, the tribal government, we'd have hundreds of people show up. So the respect was just there. And I see here where there's some, the Grand Council, the bylaws of the AIM Grand Governing Council. I think this is really important, because these now are people that are elders of the movement. And this is really, really important. There's just some highlighted parts here, and one is respect for women. Part of it says we must remember to acknowledge and respect the sacredness in each other, not just men over here, women over there, but in each other. And this requires that men and women treat each other with patience, honesty, respect, and justice. And I think that's how you're doing with your new chapter. You know, it sounds like this is a good thing, you know, with these virtues and stuff. The example of the sacred woman teaches us that women must be prepared to defend people, etc., etc., and they are respected for their important abilities to our societies. I mean, yeah, there's certain aspects that women handle, and that, but it's in harmony, because the men have their certain things they do, and it balances out. Harmony is in balance. So that's the strength, and always has been strength, of the American Indian movement. Women also are responsible for monitoring the political processes within our movement to ensure that political leadership reflects the best interests of the people. Now that goes back to tradition and culture way, way back, when women's circles in some of our original nations, they made those decisions. They were the ones that decided the politics. The example of the sacred man is under the guidance of the elders. I think this is really well written. I never got a chance to really look at it myself. I just knew it was a good thing, you know, but now here I am reading it, and that's good. Virtues of the men, Wichasha. There's, you know, of course, loyalty, honesty, generosity, bravery, fortitude and strength of character. That's what bravery means. Respect, honor, to show and live. To show and live respect for yourself, for elders, children, and women. Very, very, very important. I think there's one here that's specific to women. And there's a whole list, of course, but spiritual laws. The ways of the Chanupa in those spiritual laws, it's very important today. Public community, possible banishment, all these kind of things that come under spiritual laws if you're going to disregard the very fundamentals of the American Indian movement. And I'm glad it's written down, you know, because as time goes by, time changes. What's going on in this world now, it's very hard to maintain these very important values and traditional systems. But that's what made the movement so strong all these years, is because of respect and the harmony. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you. I think we have time for one more question. We have to wrap it up. Yes, Samuel?
Yeah, I've, in my own self-improvement, trying to be a better person, I've went to take domestic violence classes, And it really taught me a lot of stuff that I wasn't aware of. You know, how to communicate with your significant other, your spouse, women, you know. And I would like to see if you women can endorse like some of this domestic violence classes in the school curriculums, because it's something that should be taught at a level when these kids are young, coming up, instead of calling each other, you know, names and fighting. It teaches them a way how to, instead of reacting to something, it teaches them how to respond. And it also teaches us men how to become listeners, so that we can keep our mouths shut. Sometimes, you know, we need to just shut up and listen. And sometimes as a man, our egos get in the way. We just want to, hey, I'm the man, you got to listen to me. No, you got to just, you know, it teaches you how to communicate constructively. And I think the mothers are the nurturing ones. You know, maybe they might have a better power to influence this school curriculum to teach the children that at school, because nowadays a lot of parents both have to work. They don't have the time for their kids, you know. And when I was raised up, you know, I was put it with the babysitter. I was molested as a child, 5 years old, and, by my babysitter. It's a woman, and I always, it changed my outlook towards women. You know, I had a bad outlook towards them. And, you know, now that I have a little son, I think if some woman molested my son, it would really, you know, I'd want to take some sort of revenge out on that person. But, you know, I've forgiven that person and said prayers and through the, you know, with my family and going to ceremonies. But we have a lot of communicational problems with the men and women, and a lot of it was because we don't know how to talk to each other. But that domestic violence class that I took on my own, everybody's there from the court, but I went on my own, and it costs $160 a month. But they should teach that in the schools so people can learn how to respect each other. And that's all I wanted to say.
That's a good point. It's really difficult to get into the mainstream of education other than volunteering and on the reservation. We do that through the Head Start, but it seemed like there's a gap in there after that, and then high school, and then so it does. You're right.
I'd like to comment on that.
Okay.
I work with children. I am also what you consider as a writer for many aspects of my life. And what I learned when I was in Wounded Knee was the strength that women had. The power that they had was incredible. And they gave me the insight to be able to leave that place and have the power in me to be able to carry on and give the strength to the children that don't have it. Because I myself had been tormented so much abuse at so many levels, that I make sure when I do my storytelling, I communicate with all children. And I tell them to be strong and to stand up for themselves and to have the power and the strength inside themselves to say no, to have the power in themselves to stick up for themselves, to say somebody is doing something that they should not do. I just came from a conference, women's conference last month, and they said that Native American women have suffered the most in brutality and in incest and in child abuse than any other race. And it's quiet and it's not talked about, and that it has to be aware.